What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode here of the BlockHash Podcast, your number one resource for everything that is happening in the emerging tech space. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe wherever you listen to or watch the show. Today, I'm joined by another wonderful guest, Toby Gilbert. He is the co-founder at Pact Swap. We're going to learn more about Pact Swap today, what they're all about, and what they're working on here in 2025. Toby, welcome to the show. Pleasure to have you here. How you doing?
Thank you for having me here. Yeah, I'm good. Thank you.
Awesome. To get things underway, would love to learn a little bit more about yourself and your background, and maybe what made you want to be a part of this space. What got you interested in Web3 in the first place, and how'd that eventually lead to co-founding PactSwap?
I've been building companies in different areas for a long time, 20 years, probably plus now. The most recent ones over the past 15 years have been telecoms companies. And around about, it would have been December 2017, I was every 2 years I'd arrange a trip. One would be in Ibiza in the summer, and the other one would be in Goa in India in the winter. We would bring together a whole load of different people that would kind of, it was an idea, thought camp sort of thing. And we were in Goa in India, I said December 2017, and someone I'd been working with for 8 years in telecoms, who was a deep tech. His kind of papers he wrote on AI at the University of Oslo doing computer science like 30 years ago had been published by NASA and the US Department of Defense, and they used his ideas and their technology. And we'd done rather well out of telecoms together. And he was explaining blockchain to me. And I didn't realize, but it was kind of like dragging me down this rabbit hole. And a lot of the ideas that he was coming up with were around interoperability and problems with blockchains being in silos. And if the space was ever going to advance or scale or reach its true potential, then you would have to break out of these silos that these blockchains were in. And I committed an investment to him. And then by May of 2018, I ended up taking over the project, and that's been the past 7+ years of my life, is being dragged down this Web3 rabbit hole in really what is deep infrastructure.
Nice, man. Nice. Was there any initial inception point for you? For a lot of people, it was like Bitcoin or Ethereum or buying their first token or playing in DeFi for the first time. Was there anything in particular that was like an awe-inspiring moment that made you firmly want to do something in this space?
No, there was no particular currency that I found inspiring outside of Bitcoin, obviously. In fact, moving into 2018, I found the majority of tokens and coins uninspiring, because I remember kind of getting stuck into it the summer of 18, and we went into arguably what is the biggest bear market that we've ever seen. And the kind of the sentiment and the mood behind it was, I think crypto's over, crypto's dead, it was a fad, this is never going to pull through. My kind of inspiration was the pain points with the underlying technology. And I suppose the bet was being taken on, no, it is going to survive, it is going to grow. And at some point in time, those pain points need to be solved. Otherwise, this industry isn't going to reach its potential. So that was the inspiration. I took a big dive. It wasn't like, hey, I kind of bought Bitcoin and made a load of money out of it. It was, I took the rabbit hole deep dive into the underlying, infrastructure of the technology and trying to solve those pain points, which thinking about it is a really strange way to do it, because I've ended up investing and raising a considerable amount of money and putting it into this industry, where other people have kind of started at a point where they've made a load of money and then got more interested and carried on. So I think I started at the hard end and just kept on going.
And then tell me more about Pact Swap. I'm very curious maybe what the core mission is for you guys, and maybe what makes it the, I guess, most capital efficient cross-chain DEX that might be out there right now. What makes it really stand out?
Sure. I mean, it kind of starts at the beginning of what I just said, that blockchains are in their own silos. So if you think about them being different operating systems that are incompatible with each other, and they have assets that are issued and live on those chains, being the tokens. And it is very, very difficult to swap those assets, to move them between the different chains, which in turn then puts a chokehold on liquidity. And that's why you see centralized exchanges having just completely dominated the space in terms of being able to move those tokens around. But at the same time, we have centralized gatekeepers that are effectively overlords. They're controlling the decentralized space. And I think our kind of entry point on what we built as the underlying infrastructure and then building PactSwap on top of that underlying infrastructure is to disrupt that whole narrative and put the power back into the people's hands, the users' hands, that they can actually swap tokens between different chains in the decentralized space at the right price point. And that hasn't been achieved to date, especially when you look at native Bitcoin. And that's one of the key areas and pain points that we are looking or have solved and are now launching.
Interesting. And is that part of what makes up the acronym for PACT, the penalty adjudication of cross-chain transactions? I imagine that's a important mechanism.
Well, the way it's been approached to date, so there are three main protocols and the respective DEXs that are built on top of them that manage the swapping of assets that include native BTC. So that's Chainflip, TorChain, and Maya Protocol. And when they came into the space, the quickest route to market for these guys is to effectively glue a blockchain in between the incompatible blockchains. So we refer to look at it and boil it down to validator sets. So if we use TorChain as an example, and what they were doing when they set out on this mission was using the tools that they had at their disposal was absolutely groundbreaking. And that was say, okay, we've got Bitcoin sitting over here, we've got Ethereum sitting over here. People want to swap ETH for Bitcoin or any of the assets that live on the Ethereum blockchain. And so now we're going to take validators on the Tor chain, and we're going to use those validators to swap the tokens between the chains. And then in addition to that, we need to put up collateral with those validators. And to do that, when there's any sort of volume on the platform, we have to lock that collateral up for long periods of time. And we can't judge how many daily swaps or the value of those daily swaps are going to be. So we're going to lock up a lot of collateral. And in TorChain's case, that was in excess of $400 million. Now, there's a cost to those validators, and there's a cost to that collateral that's being locked up. And that cost is then directly passed down to the retail parties that are doing the swaps. And the result of which is to move Bitcoin into Ethereum with all the hidden costs. And once it's delivered on chain, is in excess on average 2%. And so now you look at, you go to Binance as a newbie retail customer and you're paying 30, 50 bips, and people literally go to where it's cheaper. So that whole architecture that has existed previously, where they were bootstrapping, they were getting into the market quickly, which was solving pain points in a decentralized way, but was way too expensive, means that they've been completely overtaken by DEXs. And to go back to your question, Pact means refers to the adjudication is replacing the requirement for those validators and locking up that collateral for a long period of time using a new architecture and saying it's a promise. And the promise is on the ask side of a trade, I'm holding Bitcoin, the bid side of a trade, I'm holding Ethereum. And if the Ethereum is not delivered for the Bitcoin on a pact, on a promise, then it will be adjudicated by a smart contract, and the collateral the market maker on the bid side of the trade posts will be slashed. They will lose that. That's the adjudication part. So the pact would have been broken, the promise wouldn't have been fulfilled, and then the collateral will be lost on the bid side of the trade by the market maker. And so using this new architecture, which I can go into more detail about, it then mitigates the requirement for the validator sets. It mitigates the requirement for all of this collateral being locked up for these long periods of time, and that equals a cost saving. And then that cost saving is then being passed over to the retail swappers that are using it. And that's what the meaning of Pact is and what it delivers. It does what it says on the tin.
And then also, I noticed a number of different things in terms of maybe what separates Pact from other swaps that are out there that maybe are important to touch on, such as trustless swaps or having permissionless listings. We kind of touched on this a little bit, but having native Bitcoin, being able to go to anything or anywhere. Do you want to kind of expand on any of that a little bit, or areas that
Yeah,
might
sure.
be important for users to know?
Absolutely. So in the first part, just going back to the architecture, we rely and have built a cross-chain reactive smart contract framework. So those are smart contracts that effectively live on all the different blockchains that the underlying platform supports. It's constantly monitoring the events on those blockchains, and it reacts to those events. So using that architecture, you can now collateralize the smart contract and automatically do the swap between the two parties without inserting, in TorChain's case, 120 validators plus in between the transactions. So instead of having the individuals that are there operating those validators, you're now just relying purely upon a smart contract in a trustless framework, which really is what this space is all about. And then we've made it fully composable. So effectively, we've put the protocol out into the market, and then you can go and build on top of that. So people can integrate it, they can build their own widgets and so on and so forth. They can add their bots onto the site. And we allow for permissionless listing at that point in time. So anyone that wants to come and list a token on the chains that the underlying protocol supports, they can simply go up there, post their liquidity, and they can list their tokens and so on and so forth. So we've tried to make this and deliver this in a most decentralized way possible, which is really important to note because I keep on banging on about this, but I want to draw it back to examples, because you then see a whole load of DEXs being released at the moment, supposedly DEXs that allow for trading and so on and so forth, with a whole load of centralized components like Hyperliquid. And it's like, yeah, we're a DEX. It's like, okay, well, maybe you've got some component parts of you that are a DEX, but to allow all this magic to go on over here, there's definitely centralized components to it. We've gone to the opposite end of that spectrum and said, here's the protocol, it's out here, it's composable. You can list any tokens you want. And then we're going to draw in liquidity from several different parties. We are actually fully decentralized.
I'm curious how this plays into something like fragmentation as well. It's a big problem in the space that we're all trying to solve. And I'm curious if you think that PactSwap can be a really solid solution for that, or if you think fragmentation is a much more, I think, deeply ingrained issue in the space right now, just given how widespread liquidity is across multiple different chains, and being able to unlock that and all kind of tie it back together and be like glue, kind of like you talked about a little bit earlier. Do you think PactSwap can really be a solid solution around the idea of fragmentation specifically, or do you think that's more deeply rooted and it's going to take more time?
Everyone's talking about this bull run at the moment, and they're saying, you're seeing huge capital inflows that are coming into the space. And if you drill down into it a little bit more, the number of on-chain wallets that have been created since the last bull run that ended at the beginning of 22, and the bull run that preceded that, to where we are today, you do not see a considerable increase of on-chain wallets that justifies the liquidity that has come into the space. So I think it's safe to say with ETFs and all of these sorts of things, you see a lot of institutional that are just simply dipping their toe in the water, because if they were fully moving in, forget about $3 trillion, that's a tiny market in real world terms, you would see something that was a vast increase on that. I think that fragmentation of different chains and how that threads through into a practical use case is one of the largest contributors in a negative way to bringing in, mass retail. Um, my mum has started dipping her toe in the water and saying, "Hey, I want to buy some Bitcoin." It's how do I do it, sort of thing. We're trying to get her into DeFi, where you have to go to one place to buy one token. transfer it to one a particular wallet, go somewhere else to buy another token. You might need the two tokens in combination to be able to operate on a day. You've lost her. You've just entirely lost her at this point in time. Every time. So, solving fragmentation, it should be an absolute key priority of all of us, because the only parties that are winning out of this are the centralized, for example, exchanges and wallets and so on and so forth. They're in a black box at this point in time, so they can solve fragmentation because they can easily move assets between themselves. And once again, we're back at the trade-off of being with centralized parties. What we are doing is we support 11 chains today. Soon we'll have Solana, Base, and Ton on there as well. So this is going to increase up to 14 chains, and that includes native Bitcoin, Litecoin, Doge, Ethereum, Polygon, Arbitrum, Tron, already there amongst others, USDT on 3 separate networks. So as we expand the different chains that we support, it is a one-stop shop where you can come, connect your wallet, simply swap those assets at the lowest price point with minimal compliance overhead that is being run. We're not talking about bringing fiat money in and out. This is the swapping of tokens. And at that point, our platform can be integrated via an iframe from Web3 games to merchants, to corporates, to absolutely anybody else that want to be able to handle the swapping of the different assets between the different chains at the right price point. And we are straight up solving the question of fragmentation right here and right now in that one-stop shop. And once again, drawing away from centralized parties to the decentralized world in which we inhabit. And that's where it should exist. So I think it's absolutely key, to answer your question bluntly, that we solve the problem of fragmentation, make it as simple and easy as possible for people to use, so that we can usher in the next wave of retail users that are actually going to further decentralize the space and support it as it grows.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I run into this problem almost on a daily basis, whether it's friends or family or colleagues that I work with outside this space that are trying to figure out a way to participate. Some people want to put it, capital towards retirement. Some people want to actively invest. Some people just want to have fun in the space and try all these amazing things that we talk about. But there's such a barrier, I think, for most people to get in because, like you mentioned, having to understand how to connect a specific wallet to a specific interface in DeFi or specific DEX to tap into liquidity and lending and borrowing and you have to have this token. It's got to be wrapped this way or bridged over here. And it's like, you can't interact with this unless you also have that. And it's like, it's so it's so complicated and convoluted in a way that I feel like it doesn't need to be. I think it's another thing that we really need to clean up in this space is making things very consumer friendly. I don't think anything is consumer friendly. It's degen friendly, but it's not consumer friendly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's also kind of a lack of, I would say, product specialists that have come from the real world and have moved into the DeFi space. And the ones that have are all projects that are projecting themselves in the decentralized space. And I go once again, Hyperliquid, for example, have absolutely won, where people can then use a platform in a decentralized environment that has I would say, a user interface that is recognizable from the real world. And then you just see huge traction that occurs. And one of the greatest problems that exists is great real world product managers cost an absolute fortune. And really the only people who you live and die by the product that you release, right? So they're the ones that, get the big bucks. And they've been soaked up in large part by the major exchanges. And it's not unheard of for product managers to be being paid $50,000 a month basics and plus. And so for a startup DeFi project that really shouldn't have it. It's not a nice thing to have. It needs great product to be able to get adoption, then you need to have quite a significant budget to be able to acquire the right talent to be able to make that happen. And that's been a massive pain point, I would say, up until today. But when you see projects like Hyperliquid breaking through, then that shows where the potential lies. And when you could get the potential that's there, then that allows projects offering something similar to raise more and then attract more talent. But it's a huge must. It must happen. Otherwise, DeFi is going to stay as a dirty little secret somewhere.
Yeah, I hope it doesn't stay as a dirty little secret because it's such an amazing thing that we're creating and developing, and I think it can unlock amazing things for a lot of people. It's just it's again it's just so difficult for so many people to access today because they just can't wrap their head around it, let alone traditional finance. I have a hard time trying to get families sometimes to understand what an ETF is or what options trading is. Like, how are they going to understand anything in DeFi? So there's a lot of, I think, education, terminology, keeping up with the news. God, I feel like there's something new happening every single week in this space. A month can feel like a year feels like a decade, at least at this pace of innovation. Actually, this is a good question. Do you think that maybe the innovation in the space is outpaced basic comprehension for most people, for ordinary people? Like, do you think we've innovated maybe too fast?
I think the glossary doesn't help. We've
True.
kind of constructed our own language, right? And and I think people do struggle with that. I had someone come in and see me a couple of days ago, and they've been in the digital space for 15 years, and they're really sharp, switched on person, and saying, "Hey, I really want to get into crypto, and what do you think my entry point is?" And I said, "Well, I think the first thing you need to do is read up on the glossary. You know, what are words and our vocabulary that we've kind of set out there, how that translates into real world speak." And I think when you get stuck into it and you really, really understand it, I think there's a lot of the terminology that we use that immediately threads back into the real world. But you have to do the excuse me, you've got to do the translation of it, and you've got to get under the hood of it. Otherwise you're going to get, if I tell you to start watching this or start reading that and get your head into a white paper and you're going to get lost because you're just not going to know what the words mean. So I think there is a translation issue, and I think that comes from a place where a lot of the OGs that I know uh, in this space, they created the industry. It came from scratch, from somewhere. It had very little relation to real world technology. For example, overlaying Web3 over Web2 and then seeing that explode. How can you tokenize content and so on and so forth? But there's still a delta, there's still a disjoint between Web2 and Web3 that's there today. But as we see a more merging of Web 2, Web 3 into Web 2, or Web 3 into real world assets, and so on and so forth. It's the ability to be able to build those bridges, translate, convert information in a digestible, understandable format that is going to see that springboard for real world adoption. So I think we innovate very quickly. I think we have to because things break. There are bad actors. I think we've got to be on our toes to be able to survive as we kind of innovate. You see market shocks like last Friday, where everyone thinks, "Oh, it's $3 trillion," which is absolutely nothing. So when one piece of news comes out, the market can drop like massively. So that shows real world liquidity where the Nasdaq went down 3%. Some alt tokens were wiped out, and Bitcoin goes down 20%, and so you see the correlation. So I think we have a long way to go. We have to see more liquidity come into the space. We need more product that is going to bring liquidity in the space. It has to stabilize the space effectively. And yeah, we need translation. We need real world people. We need to build those bridges so the liquidity can come in, the right products come in, the right uptake is there. And that is part, I suppose, in the next 3 years to try and push that through. And I think there's less of a question whether it's inevitable if it's going to happen or not. I think, we can safely say now, outside of a black swan event, quantum computing or something, it is going to happen. But I think that's going to have to be a key focus for major stakeholders in the space to really push that.
Yeah, quantum's an interesting one. We could talk for a long time on that. Any thoughts on, that might being a threat or opportunity for the space? I've heard a lot of different takes. A lot of people are concerned, and others are actually very optimistic about maybe what it could provide. But any thoughts, maybe how that could affect DeFi in the future, or just the fabric of how blockchain kind of is existing today?
I'm going to give my age away. I remember 1999, December the 31st, and you know, being at a party with a bunch of friends in London, and it was like, oh, midnight's approaching. Are all the computers in the world going to shut down?
For
And
Y2K.
yeah, right. There was this whole kind of like scare mongering and a roll of the drums. Our world is going to come to an end. Buy candles. Tin food, and 5 minutes past midnight. And going, oh, the world hasn't ended. Mobile phones still work. Oh, the internet's still up. Or what was the internet then? Um, I think that I was very much, having gone through that, very much in the camp of, supercomputers. Are they going to be able to kind of crack crypto wallets? Replicate token issuance on chains and so on and so forth. Until I was in Ibiza this summer with one of the smartest guys I know, who's the lead financial guy at DNA Fund, one of the OGs in the space, and the co-founders were the founders at Tether and EOS and number of other major tokens. And he was like, "No, this is real." And I was like, "Okay, explain it to me." Which was, I'm not sure it was a clever thing to say, 'cause, 3 hours later he was still explaining it to me. But it was a scary narrative, which is, even if there's a 20% chance that this can happen, and in his opinion it was greater than that, then we could find ourselves in really sticky water, and you would only really find out you were there when you were there. And if that did occur, there would be no backpedaling, there would be no saving the space, because people would front run it, take tokens, get them on the market. Everything really would crash, and you wouldn't be recovering from this position. And he was saying, there are projects out there that have developed quantum proofed addresses and so on and so forth, and they're not huge upgrades at all, and no one is yet taking this seriously. And the risk of this occurring, whilst it is not a given, it's not a certainty, it's enough of a percentage. And the guy is a mathematician quant. Um, and it got to the point where I was like I was calling up the team, going, we need quantum proof addresses and effective immediately. Get it in the prioritization queue. And I've become a bit of an evangelist, saying, look, I'm not saying this is going to happen. I'm saying, but there's a high enough chance that it could happen, that there should be a mad rush to quantum proof, and build a fence around what we're doing in relatively small upgrades with minimal costs. But you know what it's like? You kind of wake up every day and you've got a list of priorities, and it's like, well, that hasn't happened yet. And you begin to sleepwalk into a problem, and you only really know you're there when you're in the problem. That old analogy about a frog in a pot of cold water that's slowly being heated up till it boils alive. I think this is something that we should have a keen eye on.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a problem at some point. I don't know. Some people think it's accelerating and we'll see it affect us over the next half decade or decade. And some people think it won't happen in our lifetime. And some people think it'll happen tomorrow. Who knows? But it will happen eventually. It's just a matter of time. But yeah, I look at it the same way that we used to look at computer viruses, and we didn't have any protection for computers when they first appeared. And then we developed antivirus software, and then everything was all good, and on we go. So I kind of imagine, in the same light, quantum can be very scary in a lot of ways. It may also present really great solutions for protection too, that I think people will use it for good, hopefully, so that we can have anti-quantum software, anti-quantum chains, or quantum resistance across certain protocols. Someone will figure something out. I'm pretty certain it'll happen. So I'm not overly worried. I'm just, hopefully nothing big breaks. Like, hopefully all of a sudden there's trillions of dollars in Bitcoin, and Bitcoin is just siphoned or something happens to it, or
That would be a problem.
that would
Yeah.
be a massive
I
problem.
think, but on the other hand, quantum computing is predominantly being developed, and in my understanding, and I could be wrong, by state actors. It takes a huge amount of power, a huge amount of investment. And one would hope India is kind of coming into the frame at the moment on crypto. One would hope that China ends up going there, and if it does, well, it's definitely not in the United States' favor or any European countries, so on and so forth, to try and break these networks in which they're invested. So one would hope that the motivation isn't there to try and crash out the Bitcoin network, for example. But fingers crossed, time will tell.
Well, the early internet was a DARPA project, so
Yes.
who knows? Who knows
Who
how these
knows?
things
Yeah.
play out eventually, but crossing our fingers for good things. Awesome. And then what's on the roadmap here for PactSwap, the rest of this year here in 2025? We only got a few months left. Anything people should be aware of in terms of maybe some new updates, things you guys are planning to announce or launch, or new additions to PactSwap, and then maybe some things to hint at maybe going into next year that you guys are excited about?
Sure. So, I mean, we're running a horrible process at the moment of actually carrying on building the technology at the same time as going for a token launch. They're almost two separate businesses that are in conflict with one another. So, on the technology side, this is just a case of adding on more chains, features, functionality, and getting as much liquidity on the platform as humanly possible with different participants. And then on the other side of this, we're getting the token ready for launch on launch pads and exchanges before the end of this year is what we're focused on at the moment. Community numbers are exploding. There's the whole educational process hasn't been done before in the way in which we're doing it. We're telling people they've got to go on the platform, they've got to check it, and it's an overwhelming response of how are you guys actually doing this at this price point? This is really easy to use. And so the community is just going viral at the moment. And there's lots more to come on that over the past 7, 10 days. And we're in conversations, as I said, launch pads, exchanges, launching in a very low FDV. We're trying to get this in the real world. Instead of launching at a valuation of hundreds of millions, we're launching at $50 million and trying to get a steady return and chart for any of the participants that are there, instead of these huge highs and lows that you see with other projects. And yeah, that's going to be the next 6, 8 months of our life, I would say. That's the tunnel focus.
Nice. That's exciting. And where people keep up with all of that, is the website the best place to go? Do you guys have socials, docs, community? Where would you direct people that want to get some more information?
Yeah, I think going to the website, and all our socials are on there, from X, Discord, and Telegram. Telegram is PactSwap DEX, and then our website is PactSwap PactSwap.io. All docs, everything is on there.
Awesome. If anyone wants to connect with you directly as well, are you on X? Do you have a LinkedIn, or where can people reach out, send you a message?
Yeah, you on X is fine. It's at Toby, Toby, Coinweb, Coinweb.
Awesome. Toby, I appreciate it. This has been a really good, insightful conversation. Love learning about what you guys are doing with PactSwap, talking about the space more broadly, DeFi, quantum, some interesting topics coming out of this conversation. So I appreciate the time. Enjoy your day. It's my night here. Glad we were able to make this work, and hopefully we can meet up at some point, maybe do a episode in person at one of these millions of events and conferences that happen in this space every single year. So yeah, I would love to meet up at some point and catch up, and yeah, keep in touch.
Likewise. Thank you for having me here.